Ever feel lost when trying to get something done locally? Like, well, who do you even call about that pothole?
It can be confusing.
Yeah. Today, we're diving into state and local governments, and you'll know who does what and how you can make a difference where you live.
Exactly. Using a state and local government's 101 presentation, we're looking at these often overlooked levels of government.
We focus so much on national news, but state and local decisions, like schools, roads, even parks, are what directly shape our daily lives. It's all connected.
Yes, it's an intricate web. And to understand, we need to start with the structure. State governments, like the federal level, have three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial separation of powers.
Checks and balances. But who's in charge at the state level?
The governor. They enforce laws, manage the budget, appoint officials. It's a big job.
Like the CEO of the state.
You could say that. They have major influence. But there are differences. Like, most governors can only serve 2 four-year terms, much shorter than the president's 2 terms.
2 terms only. Does that make it harder to get things done?
It's about balance. Shorter terms prevent anyone from holding too much power for too long, keeping them accountable to the people.
So they need enough time to make a difference, but not get too comfortable. Even these small structural differences can have big impacts.
Absolutely. And that's just state level. Local governments, well, that gets even more complex.
Local governments, cities, towns, sure, but there are so many boards and councils. How do we keep track?
Right. Like, imagine you want a new park in your neighborhood. Seems simple, but who do you call? It's not always City Hall. It comes down to the different types of local governments.
Okay, break it down for me. Who are these local players?
Let's start with counties. They're like organizers, providing services like record keeping, social services, managing elections.
Ah, so like getting your marriage license or registering to vote.
Exactly. Then you have your cities, towns, and villages. They handle stuff that directly shapes your community zoning, public safety, and those parks and recreation facilities.
And I'm guessing they have their own mayors and city councils making those decisions.
Yeah. You got it. Each municipality has its own structure, which is why it can be confusing. And then special districts.
Special districts, what makes them special? Why do we need them?
Think of them as independent units for specific functions. School districts, water districts, even those park districts. Sometimes things need focused attention and resources.
So to get that park built, I might need to talk to the park district, not just the city council.
Exactly. Knowing which level handles what can be the key to getting things done.
It's like a puzzle, each piece with a specific role.
Mm-hmm.
But how does the federal government fit into all of this? Is there a system?
Yes. It's called federalism. Power is divided and shared between the national and state governments. Each level has its own lane, but sometimes those lanes overlap.
And when they overlap, who gets the final say? Like if a state and the federal government disagree.
Ah, that's where the supremacy clause comes in. If there's a conflict between a federal law and a state law, the federal law wins. The trump card, you could say.
So even with shared power, the feds have the final word. That makes sense, but could lead to some power struggles, I imagine.
It definitely can. Imagine a state with weaker environmental regulations than the federal government. The supremacy clause means the federal regulations win.
Wow, it's not just theoretical. It has real-world consequences.
Precisely. And this balance has evolved, shaped by court decisions, politics, social movements. It's dynamic, always changing.
Okay, my head's spinning, but in a good way.
Yeah.
From governors as CEOs to federalism, there's more to state and local government than I thought.
And it's all crucial for being an engaged citizen.
Speaking of citizens, how do we have a say? It's easy to feel like our voices get lost.
That's where elections and voting come in. You get to choose who represents your values at each level. Governors, state legislators, local officials, they all need your vote.
Right, voting. It's
Yeah.
easy to forget about local elections with all the national stuff going on. But does voting locally really matter?
Absolutely. Think about it. Your vote could determine who's making decisions about your kid's school, the safety of your neighborhood, or even what development projects happen in your community.
You know, I hadn't really thought about it like that. It's easy to think one vote doesn't matter, but locally, it can have a much bigger impact.
Exactly. And it's about more than just showing up on election day. You have to be informed. Research candidates understand the issues.
Informed voting, got it. But are there other ways to get involved besides voting? What if I have an issue I'm passionate about but don't know where to start?
There are so many ways. Town hall meetings are a great way to hear from your elected officials directly, ask questions, voice concerns. You can also contact them directly through email, phone calls, even social media.
Wow, we can actually talk to those making decisions.
You can. And a well-written letter or email can make a difference. Elected officials listen, especially to genuine concerns.
So, we can speak up,
Hmm.
but how do we go from expressing opinions to advocating for change?
Advocacy groups. They focus on specific issues and can amplify your voice. By joining forces, they can put pressure on those in power.
It's about finding people who share your passion and working together.
Exactly. And it's not just big gestures. Staying informed, attending meetings, even writing to your local newspaper, it all contributes.
So it's about showing up, participating, making our voices heard in whatever way feels right.
Yes. And the more engaged we are, the more responsive our government becomes. It's a cycle. Individual action leads to collective progress.
This is inspiring, but let's be real. It's easy to feel overwhelmed. How do we make a difference without getting bogged down by the complexity?
Start small, focus on what you're passionate about. Don't try to do everything at once.
So find what lights our fire and go from
Yeah.
there.
Maybe it's schools, housing, the environment, whatever it is, learn about it, connect with others, get involved at a comfortable level.
Sometimes we forget the power of small, consistent actions. Even just staying informed is a big step.
Absolutely. It's not about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about showing up, being curious, engaging authentically.
This is about more than civics. It's about reclaiming our power. We're not just bystanders. We can shape our communities.
Exactly. And that's what makes state and local government so important. It's where ideas become actions, and we as citizens can truly make a difference.
This deep dive is amazing. We've learned so much, from how governments work to voting and being active citizens.
It's been a whirlwind, but we're just getting started. Let's look at some real-world examples of how state and local policies impact our lives.
Ooh, I like where this is going. Bring on the real world stuff.
You know, it's funny. We always hear folks complaining about the government, this big, faceless thing. But state and local governments, well, they're people like you and me making decisions that directly affect us. That's where it gets interesting.
Okay, how do we go beyond complaining and actually influence those decisions?
Well, voting is key, but let's talk about being an informed voter at the state and local level.
Yeah, it's easy to say research the candidates, but where do we even begin?
First, make sure you're registered. Sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people miss out. Life gets in the way, you know.
Oh, I know. I've been there. Missed deadlines.
It happens. But once you're registered, the real work starts. Check out candidates' websites, social media, see their issues, positions, look for interviews or debates.
So getting a sense of where they stand on the things we care about.
Exactly. And don't just rely on what they say. Look for endorsements. Read articles and opinions from different sources.
Get a balanced view, not just our own echo chamber.
Right. You want a well-rounded picture. Consider their experience, too. What have they done before? What kind of impact have they had?
We're not just voting for a personality. We're choosing someone to represent us, make decisions that affect our lives.
Exactly. And sometimes it's not just about individuals. We also get to vote on specific policies, ballot initiatives, and referendums.
Ballot what now?
Yeah.
You lost me there.
No worries, those terms can be confusing. Basically, they're ways for citizens to directly vote on policies or laws. Think of a ballot initiative as a proposal from the people.
Yeah.
Get enough signatures, it goes on the ballot for everyone to vote on.
So we get to decide what's on the ballot. That's cool.
It is direct democracy in action. Referendums are similar, but they come from the legislature.
Okay, so whether it's choosing candidates or voting on policies, staying informed is key.
You got it. But voting is just one piece. There are so many other ways to get involved, even if you're not running for office yourself.
Okay, tell me more. What else can we do?
Town hall meetings are great. You can hear directly from your officials, ask questions, share your thoughts. You can also contact them directly, email, phone, even social media.
Wow, we can actually talk to those in charge.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate a well-written letter or email. They pay attention to what their constituents say, especially when it's genuine.
So we can speak up.
Yeah.
But what if we want to do more than just voice our opinions? How do we actually advocate for change?
Advocacy groups. They focus on specific issues and can amplify your voice, putting pressure on decision makers by working together.
Finding people who share your passion and joining forces, right?
Exactly. And it's not always about grand gestures. Staying informed, attending meetings, even writing a letter to the newspaper. It all matters.
So it's about showing up, participating, making our voices heard in whatever way feels right for us.
Exactly. The more engaged we are, the better our government will be. It's a cycle. Individual actions lead to progress for everyone.
I love that idea. But it's still easy to feel overwhelmed. How do we avoid getting lost in the complexity and actually make a difference?
Start small, focus on what you're truly passionate about. Don't try to do everything at once.
So find that thing that lights our fire and go from there.
Yes. Maybe it's schools, affordable housing, the environment. Learn about it, connect with others, get involved at a level that feels good for you.
Sometimes we focus so much on the big picture that we forget about the power of small, consistent actions. Even just staying informed is a huge step.
Absolutely. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up, being curious, and engaging authentically.
It's about recognizing that we have the power to shape our communities. We're not just bystanders. We can make things happen.
Exactly. That's what makes state and local governments so exciting. It's where ideas become actions, and we, as citizens, can make a real difference.
All right, we've talked structures and power, but now let's get real. How do these state and local policies actually show up in our lives?
Great question. Let's start with something universal. Education. Who decides what your kids learn, how schools are funded, even what those buildings look like? It's all a mix of state and local decisions.
So we have local school boards. How much power do they actually have when it comes to education policy?
That's where it gets interesting. School boards control day-to-day stuff, curriculum, hiring teachers, school calendars. But for big things, like funding, the state often holds the purse strings.
So even if my local board wants a new STEM program, they might be stuck if the state doesn't give them the money.
Exactly. States decide how much money goes to public schools, which affects everything. Class sizes, teacher salaries, resources. It's a big deal.
It's like this balance between local control and state influence.
Right. And it's not just education. Think about transportation. Who decides where highways go, how public transit is funded, even speed limits on your street? Again, it's state and local decisions shaping our daily commutes.
Okay, I'm seeing the connections to my life now. What about healthcare? It's a big national issue, but what role do state and local governments play?
Healthcare is a perfect example of how policies at different levels can interact, sometimes even clash. The federal government sets overall guidelines, funds Medicare and Medicaid, but states have a lot of flexibility in how they run things.
So healthcare might look different in my community compared to another state, even though it's a national issue.
Exactly. States set Medicaid requirements, regulate insurance companies, even decide on expanding Medicaid coverage under the Affordable Care Act.
I'm realizing that what's happening locally is just as important as the national news, maybe even more so.
I agree. That's why understanding these different levels of government and how you can engage is crucial. You're not just passively accepting policies, you can help shape them, create the community you want.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. I've gone from feeling lost about government to actually feeling empowered and excited to get involved.
That's wonderful to hear. And remember, it's not about becoming a political expert overnight. Just stay curious, ask questions, and find ways to engage that feel right for you.
So, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember from today? The key takeaway.
This. Decisions made at the state and local level directly impact your daily life. But you have the power to shape those decisions. Vote, participate, hold your officials accountable. You can make a difference.
That's a powerful message. It's not about feeling powerless. It's about recognizing that we can create the communities we want.
Absolutely. It's been great diving into this with you.
Thanks for joining us. And remember, don't be a bystander. Be an active part of shaping your community. See you on the next deep dive.